Hey everybody, welcome to the Black Men with Purpose podcast. We had a little glitch in the beginning, so I am still on the fence on whether or not I want to edit that out or leave that in. But and as you notice that we are minus one pivotal member of our team. We are glad to be back from our summer break. Uh, and Kev definitely wanted to be here. We were chatting with him a little bit ago, but life did what it does. Life is lifing, but our brother is doing well, and he definitely will be with us in later broadcasts as we finish up season 2. So again, welcome to the Black Men with Purpose podcast. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, it's a pleasure to have you with us. This is a safe space where we share our thoughts on a multitude of topics in hopes of helping Black males, young and not so young, to overcome the obstacles and challenges that can be hindrances to happiness, productivity, and success. We believe that through our experiences, successes, and failures, we can have some conversations that might help Black males in their respective journeys through this thing that we call life. And on today's episode, our topic is the ramifications of the assault on Black America. A lot going on, but today we want to talk about some of the events that have been going on. And I'm gonna put on my bully shoes. No, you know what, brothers? We've been gone all summer. How are y'all doing? How's everybody doing?
I'm gonna go ahead and I'll jump in. I'm doing good, bro. Everything is great. I'm happy to see y'all again. It has been a good, restful summer, but it's been um, I've missed this. I have missed this, so I'm glad to see us back on here, getting cranked back up, and I'm looking forward to uh, discussing this topic today. So I yield the floor.
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's been a hot summer. In fact, it's still hot, but it's good to be back. Uh, and looking forward to the second half of season 2.
Man, we got so much to talk about. Where do you begin? Where do you begin, man? So, but yeah, we doing life. You know what I'm saying? That's what we do. Um, we make the best of what we got, and so here we are for season 2. Hopefully, we can help some folks navigate this thing called life. So let's get it.
Y'all see Byron trying to act like he's shy. Let's no, I'm gonna mess with you. Yeah, but we came together about this episode because obviously there's a lot of unease in the Black community amongst ourselves, amongst people we love, people we know. These conversations are happening all across the country, and in the community at large, and it's regarding this political and cultural climate that we find ourselves in. CRT being weaponized to aid white supremacy, anti-CRT, anti-woke. Let's talk. Well, not let's talk about. Here's my rant about woke. Give woke back to us Black folks. It don't belong to y'all. Stop using our word. You know what I mean? We got book bans, whitewashing history. They ended affirmative action, race-based killing, cop killing. DeSantis comments on slavery that we were learning stuff like it was on-the-job training. Then we had moments like the Montgomery fight, which were that was they lift every voice and say moment. But we got so much to talk to, and I say the best way to get to it is just to get into it. So, fellas, jump on in there.
All right, I'll go. John, you hit the nail on the head when you started with the anti woke. That's one of the first things I wrote down. I'm sick and tired of Ron DeSantis um, and his cronies and everybody else that is pro DeSantis yelling out, Florida is where woke goes to die. Well, you know what? I got news for y'all. We've been saying woke since I was a kid. And if you're not a kid, at least a teenager. And I'm 55 years old. So we've been saying that for a long time about staying woke. But woke doesn't mean that we're trying to get ahead of anybody else. Woke just means we're going to stay aware. We're going to learn what's going on in our communities and what's going on with our history. And we're going to teach our history. And we don't care if you like it or not. But every time I hear somebody that is on the DeSantis, or as I call him, the death sentence or D-Satan bandwagon, what I hear is that when you say anti-woke, that means you're anti-black. I don't care if you like it. I don't care if you don't like what I just said. That's how I see it. That's how I feel. And that's how a whole lot of black folk feel. So if you're saying anti-woke, I suggest you stop, because Montgomery proved we're not going to sit back and take this crap anymore. We're going to defend ourselves, and we are going to defend each other. So with that, I'll yield the floor before I get really started.
You know, this whole anti-woke initiative is actually going to end up hurting us as a collective body in America more. I mean, for us as black folks, we've been woke all our lives. You know what I'm saying? We've always had to be aware of our surroundings. We always had to be aware of. We always had to be better than our counterparts. We've been told that. I think that's been pushed more into us about you got to be better than being, you know, you don't trust people. You know what I'm saying? I don't. If y'all like me, my parents had never said don't trust or don't work with people. However, my parents have always said you got to be better, and because of that, that's what intimidates people, because we're working to be better. We don't care what you bring to the table. Our goal is that we always gonna be better, and that means if y'all want to invite us to the table, we'll just create our own building and bring our own table. And I think that's what this whole anti-woke thing with DeSantis, they're just afraid of that. And it's like the biggest thing is we're not going to treat you all like you've been treating us for centuries. We just want our own. We just want to have a fair opportunity at the table, just like you. And if you don't give us that, we'll just create our own. One thing I wanted to share down the line, you know, I have some people, I've been following superintendents in school systems around the country. Right now, there's 7,200 school systems around the country. Of that, only like less than 2% of those school systems have black superintendents. And right now, because of DeSantis, there's been a push to push out the black superintendents around the country. There's about 10 of them in the last 8 to 12 months who've been pushed out by their school boards simply because they're black, simply because they're trying to bring not necessarily another agenda, but it's just like, hey, we're trying to create an all-inclusive environment. And because of this anti-woke agenda, you have these school systems that are pushing out qualified brothers and sisters that only want to educate our children and push them out because they're not ready for that. That's for a whole nother topic. But you know, that's just one issue of where we have people that people of color, because of who they are and what they bring to the table, are being pushed out, or at least attempted to be pushed out. But I'm done. That's my rant, if you want to call it that. But
Yeah. Yeah, you know, so the unfortunate part is that sometimes I think that the real message that should be conveyed uh, gets lost in all the emotional sentiment. Woke, anti woke, whatever. The bottom line is that I think that people in general, specifically people of color, uh, need to be educated, right? Because once you're educated, now when you speak about things, you're coming from an informed perspective as opposed to it just being emotional or something that you heard someone else say. So I would encourage people, young and old, to just focus on becoming more educated and uh, and approach it from that perspective. Because quite honestly, a lot of times You know, people want you to get riled up, right? So that what you then communicate comes from a place of emotion as opposed to a well thought out perspective based on what I know and understand as being fact. And I want to communicate that because it's actually for the betterment uh, of uh, of all people, especially our young people, right? You know, the ones that are gonna inherit this country. You know, let's think about what we can do to set them up to be successful in it. You know, whether it's breaking down barriers, whether it's opening up doors, you know, whether it's teaching them the importance of communicating how they feel. You know, 'cause I'm a firm believer no one can ever begrudge you how you feel. So, and it's okay to communicate that. So, so yes, I would just hope that that people don't let the real message that needs to go forward get lost in all the chaos of the negativity that people want to place uh, on folks speaking their mind uh, and trying to dissuade you from what you believe or what you've experienced, which is another thing. You know, you cannot try and convince someone that they haven't experienced something when they've lived through it.
Mhm.
Right. So from my perspective, you know, every time I meet someone who looks different from me, who grew up differently than me, I really want to understand what perspective they're coming from, you know, understand their experiences, what their challenges were, what they learned from that, you know, and then by, the same token, communicate to them mine in the hope that they'll take something away that they can use going forward as opposed to, you know, listening to just what's said on social media or what's just, conveyed in the news or, someone's position on something that is just based on, their tunnel vision uh, or their own lenses and they haven't had a lot of experience. So I get it. And, I'm all about love instead of war, you know, and I understand how important peace can be, uh, internal peace within each individual, so that when things come up, controversial things, you're able to go inward to make sure you fully understand what it is. And so this anti woke sentiment, my question would be, you know, how do you define woke? Is that just people being more educated than they were before? You know? And so I think context always matters. So I would just say, make sure you understand the context before you just go jumping into the water that's filled with blood, and now you got sharks swimming around trying to get at something. So, uh, but I get it. Woke, anti-woke. It's just another thing that I think serves to divide us when we should be looking for how we can come together.
Now that right there, I love the part that's missing, and it really, really woke is really an example of us not understanding our culture. Like that's not something that should be able to be used or weaponized against us because I think the first time it was mentioned in more of a popular culture, it was mentioned in a song in the 60s. But the original term woke, stay woke, is for black people when we were going through areas, sundown towns, literally stay woke. Don't fall asleep or try to sleep in these sundown towns because they will kill you. And then it transformed because of culture and being passed down. And I remember like the 80s, they say, hey, stay woke. Like, and it was a term between black people to say, hey, this stuff that they teaching you in school and all this propaganda out here, you need to stay woke, get knowledgeable on. And that just really, really feeds into what Rod said. Be knowledgeable about it. They teaching you that your history starts, that you were a slave, then Dr. King and President Obama, but it's richer than that. And just to think, uh, this propaganda that savages, they came over here and the Native Americans were savages and they pulled slaves over. The reason why they picked, one of the things they don't talk about is the reason why they picked our people to come over here is because of our agricultural genius, because of our structural genius. When they came to the New World, there were people like Esteban Negro or Black Steve, that were able to pick up multiple languages and learn how to talk with the natives of the land so that they would even be able to come in and talk and trade and do all these things. They were leveraging our skill sets, but then they want to turn it around and make it seem like we were just brutes, we're not smart, we violent, all this. And then when you get, they keep dropping a movie every once in a while. They say, oh, well, Hidden Figures, it was 3 black women. Like, yeah, we didn't maybe know that specific story, but we know that a lot of the culture, a lot of the advancements, a lot of the technology, we know that we contributed. And we know that a lot of this stuff was available prior to y'all coming over here to the heavy air quotes, new world. How you got a new world when people already live here? So like, that's the part is like, we need to be, there's a lot of times there's conversations I have and there's stuff that I just know about Black history. And then I have to question, like, why do I know this stuff? Because they didn't teach this to me in school. And and then I think so many young people aren't learning some of these basics, like stuff that our grandmothers would talk to us about, our mothers, fathers, even the old school player uncles on the corner. They might be telling wild stories, but they drop some game on you about your history and about where you come from and who you really are and all these things. And I think we need to stay on our bike about teaching who we really are, where we really come from, and all this nonsense. Like the nerve of them to take a word where we were genuinely just saying stay awake so that you don't get killed by racist white people, and then try to go through all of these mental and intellectual hurdles to make it into something when the reason why we needed the word woke is because of you. So stop it. Y'all really need to stop it. So, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, and just to just kind of throw this out there, and this is why I say that education is so important, and really understanding the contributions of all Americans, uh, even those that were enslaved and eventually freed. But I know that y'all have been seeing on the news the guy that escaped from the prison in Pennsylvania, in Chester County.
Mhm.
Well, he's been free a week. I think it was a week yesterday.
12 days, brother. 12 days.
12 days. Okay.
12
So,
days.
yeah. So I know. Yeah. So, and it just makes you wonder. And I was having this conversation, uh, with the family member, and they said, it's interesting that we could go to a country halfway across the world and find Osama bin Laden. We have a single person loose in a seemingly contained area, and we cannot track them down. And so the educational piece comes in. We got to thinking about it. Uh, what is unique to that area? Well, understanding your history, you know that that area of Pennsylvania was used to support the Underground Railroad, which means that it's possible that there's still tunnels in that area, escape routes that are not easily detectable. So just imagine if you used your education and knowledge on the Underground Railroad to try and see exactly where in that area some of those opportunities might lie. That's why it's so important to be educated. And that's why it's so important to value everyone's contributions to what has made this country so desirable to live in, especially by immigrants, you know, as opposed to trying to weaponize whatever you can against any group. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I found that to be really interesting, and it really helped me to think about how important it is to just get educated. They say knowledge is power. You got to believe that.
Speaking about getting educated, let's wade into some politically charged and fraught waters. What about old DeSantis's comments on slavery? Who wants to take that on?
So I'll start there because, again, and this is just my perspective, I think a lot of times we give stuff life when we take our oxygen and time to even speak on it, right? What I think is important is for every eligible voter in the country, no matter your race or ethnicity, to really understand the genesis of his position and his comment. And then you look in the mirror and determine if that's someone that you're willing to vote for because it speaks directly to what you value.
Now I got to push back on that one because the comments on slavery were in tandem with the changes in the curriculums in Florida that they approved, which, you know, is going to guarantee that our children are not getting, you know, they already not getting the best education, but now they're going ridiculous clown mode with some of the stuff and not allowing AP African American studies and things like that. And my other pushback is that in Florida, historically, black voters and women voters, well, minority women voters, have supported other candidates, but DeSantis has huge support from other groups. And that makes it problematic. Like, yes, we need to be strategic with our vote, but then I think we can't just say that's just us giving it life when they're actually changing. Like in Houston, in Texas, they've taken over the Houston school district. No other school district in Texas, just Houston, because it's the biggest black.
It's the biggest
They've
one.
changed all the libraries into detention centers. They call them opportunity centers, but basically detention centers to keep kids. And they've gone so far as to let go of a good percentage of the librarians. So these kids are going, and it's only in Houston County, which is the largest black school district in Texas.
Absolutely. And so that kind of is my point about getting educated on the topic and the issues surrounding that topic. So it wasn't, you know, for any other purpose other than just make sure that you understand the genesis of where that came from. And then as far as the vote, I mean, I think that that's something that every individual has to consider, whether it's for president of the United States, for governor of the state, for president of the school board, for city council. You really have to take your time, do your due diligence, and understand when you're going to cast your vote, does the person that I'm voting for represent the values that I believe in and hold dear? So that was my point. So, but I appreciate you raising my awareness.
Yeah. No, DeSantis gonna fall into that same category. If people support him, you're either ignorant, racist, or both. Because if you're ignorant enough to believe his comments and ignorant enough to support him, that goes back to your point, Rod, that you have not done your homework and you have not done your due diligence to find out more about the candidate. You know that DeSantis, the only reason he's saying what he's saying, yes, does he believe it? I wholeheartedly believe that. But he thinks there's enough of those extremists, right wing, that if he spews out that ignorance enough, there'll be enough people to support him in the polls. That's all it is. And he's ignorant in the sense of being, when you think about his past, he was a JAG in the Navy. How many people got screwed in the Navy because he was the JAG? Because of his ignorance.
Not only was he a JAG in the Navy, but he was actually an instructor. And they came back and they said that whenever he would teach, they noticed that he had a very strong position against anything to say slavery was bad. You know, like they said that he was very sympathetic towards the Confederacy.
Absolutely.
As a teacher.
Absolutely. So,
I mean,
that again, and I'm sorry. Most of the GOP candidates, there are a few, but most of them, if you support them, you're either ignorant, racist, or you're both. Which one? You know, because Nikki Haley, she flip-flops with the wind. You know, she'll say some good things to support military, and again, she only does that because it benefits her household. But then she'll flip back and forth. So you know, it goes back to his comment on race, on slavery. It was out of an ignorant place of where he is. Again, it goes back to what you're saying, Rod. You don't want to accept people's reality. And I think at the end of the day, you have people like DeSantis, most of the candidates, even the Democratic candidates. Do you accept people where their reality is? I remember watching a clip on Dr. King where he said, you know, they always telling us pull ourselves up from our bootstraps, right? But it's like you can't.
We ain't even got boots.
You ain't got no boots, right? We don't have boots. So you want to tell us to pull up, but y'all done took all the boots, y'all done took all the straps, and then y'all gonna tell us do the best you can. Whatever, man.
And not to interrupt you, man, but I always thought to pull yourself up by your bootstraps was the most ridiculous, because if somebody wore boots for pretty much a quarter of a century, if you pull from the bootstraps, you're gonna probably end up falling on your behind, you know. So like that was just always the most idiot. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Like what?
Well, wow, where do I begin? Yeah, the statements that DeSantis made about, you know, slavery, the enslaved picked up some good life skills. That's not the only, I'm gonna say it, dumbass comment that he has made. When he was running for governor against Andrew Gillum, you know, one of the first things out of his mouth, it was, to me, it was closeted, but he said it out loud. Let's not monkey this up. We have been compared to apes and monkeys since were captured and brought here, even though we were kings and queens. But he had to say it during a debate, a televised debate, let's not monkey this up.
Remember that.
So to me, that's like, don't elect him because he's ignorant. Don't elect him. So he started out with that. Then he's made those comments there, but he's also made another comment about about slavery. He said, and I'm going to quote here: "No one questioned slavery before Americans until the American Revolution, which birthed the abolitionist movement." Then he said, but the thing is, when you say that, it's like, I can point out somebody very well who questioned slavery. How about the enslaved? We were taken from our homes, we were taken from our families, and when we had families here, we were separated from them. I'm sure they were questioning the slavery, and they wanted their freedom, but they didn't. We weren't allowed to have our freedom. Our folks weren't allowed to have our freedom. But then
they always want to do the remix and act like
absolutely
American chattel slavery
absolutely
was the normal. They don't ever want to talk about year jubilee, earning your freedom, 7 years, all of these things. They don't ever want to talk about how American slavery, particularly because the longest lasting, but in the Caribbean, is some of the most brutal. They just want to talk about, you were in the fields working. What about beating? What about the raping? What about the buck breaking? What about, the part of slavery that made people property and not. So slaves were always considered, in a sense, property, but it was a sentence for a thing, and it was for a certain amount of time. And there were rules on how you could treat slaves and all this. It goes through the historical record. The slavery of the United States that created the most powerful economy at one time in the world and I'm all jumping on you, but they always want to skip. They always want to skip that
absolutely.
part. They want to skip that part.
But then to go back to DeSantis, one of the things he said right behind that statement that he had made was that you can't teach history that's being used to pursue an ideological agenda.
Wow.
No, we're teaching history. This actually happened. This is not something that we made up.
Yeah, it's not like a movie.
What is Manifest Destiny if we're not teaching ideological history? What is Remember the Alamo if we're not teaching
but again,
ideology?
But who's it right now? Who is it affecting? It's affecting us. So again, he keeps coming back, and that's the problem. That's the problem with the educational system right now, with them trying to change history. One, they don't want their kids to feel bad. I had a argument with a guy that used to be a recruiter up in New York. I'm not going to mention Rob's name, but he said it. I don't want my grandchildren to feel bad because somebody in my family might have been slave owners. Okay, well then you still teach your granddaughter that slavery was wrong.
Right.
That's what you do. You teach your granddaughter, you teach your children slavery was wrong. And again, your family might have been abolitionists. They might have been trying to help free the slaves. Teach that angle if that's what's happened. But it's not like we're trying to teach what actually happened to make anybody's children feel bad. But that's the first thing that they do. They try to make history into his story. And it keep making it a leftist agenda. Well, I'm sorry, it's not a leftist agenda to me. It's actually what happened to my folks. My sister has, and thanks to things like what's that doggone program you can use? Ancestry. She traced us all the way back to Africa. She traced us back to the Caribbean. She traced our lineage all over the world, and I'm thankful for that. But that's not a leftist agenda. That's just find out where I came from. But so what are you going to do once you're in power? You're already changing what it can be taught in schools. Are you going to close the Legacy Museum because you don't want them teaching folks, black, white, Puerto Rican, Asian, or whoever? You don't want them teaching actual history and having the pictures up of the slaves that were with the lash marks on their back? What are you going to change next? I mean, it's just utterly ridiculous, man. And like you said, Byron, anybody who votes for DeSantis, you're either racist, ignorant, or both. You couldn't have hit the nail any further on the head, bro, if you had tried. But I'm gonna yield the floor. I got pissed off again.
They messed around and made Ray mad.
Yep. I mean, just the fact that, just the impact of slavery, if nothing else, just how our families were separated after we got here to the States. Forget bringing them from over in Africa on ships. We're talking about people that tried to make it work here, families who got married and then their children were separate. Husbands and wives were separated and never saw each other again. Children were separated from their mothers. They never saw them again. I mean, just that impact alone here in the States, how that's still impacting, and it's still impacting us. But guess what? Every time, guess what we're doing? We're doing our best to get back up and make something happen of it. But it's almost like with DeSantis and some of his other cronies, man, it's like, let's find a new way to try to demonize the upcoming of Black folks, and when you think about, back in the day was, it was ghettos. We don't go to the ghetto because something happened to you in the ghetto. But guess what they're doing now? They're taking those ghettos now and regender, because that's who she is. They're regenderifying those ghettos now. And now they're pushing out all our people again, folks that, at least here in DC, you got folks that came up from the South in the 40s and 50s, that paid for that property. Now guess what they're doing? The property's paid for. But guess what? We've raised the taxes so you can't afford it. And guess what we're doing? We're pushing folks out again. So it's like it's just a continuation of trying to gentrify, get rid of Black folks. Like our agenda don't matter.
Like it don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So how about we take a quick pivot and go from the political cultural conversation to the nitty gritty, the racially motivated killing in Jacksonville. And I thought that was interesting that DeSantis was bold enough to even show up and show his face in a situation like that. And there's been a lot of discourse about, well, how come we always put this out and that out? Like, this kid had a manifesto. There was a swastika on his gun. He tried to get on an HBCU. Thank God that the security guard ran him away. But, this is the uptick. And it was a conversation that I was just having with my people earlier today, talking about, today being, as we're recording, it's September 11th. And we know all of the things that Muslim people in our country have gone through and continue to go through, looked at a certain way, this way and that way. And I said, and it's really interesting that nobody ever feels this way about these radicalized white men that by head and shoulders have committed more harm, more murders, more killing, more loss of life, more bloodshed than any other group in the past, 10 years at least? But yet everybody else is, and I think when we talk about, like, this is just the people that got killed and that deserve better. A 19-year-old, there was another young man, and then a grandmother that was maybe a couple of years older than me that didn't deserve it. They were just going to Dollar General, and somebody just hate Black people, and now somebody doesn't have a son, somebody doesn't have a mother, a grandmother, all of that. This is just,
it's happening all over the place. I mean, it's not just Jacksonville. Look at Buffalo. Look at Buffalo. Folks in a doggone Tops grocery store just out trying to get groceries, and they're murdered by someone who has this right agenda, the alt-right. I mean, come on. So again, it's to your point, John, you were talking about the I'm gonna call it terrorism, because that's what it is. But they have been terrorists since 1614. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm calling a spade a spade. Slavery, that was terrorism. All to modern day. You go back into the 60s. My mother lived it. My father lived it. You talk about sundown towns. My mother is from Dothan, Alabama. I'm sorry, no, I'm not Dothan. She's from Luverne, Alabama. There were hangings regularly around Luverne, Alabama. There were hangings everywhere in Alabama. Terrorism. And now here it is. Now, because they're being made to feel like we're trying to take over, or the immigrants that are coming here coming to take over, or all the somebody that we all know that used to be a recruiter in North Carolina. I'm not going to mention Jeff's name, but he has said he said all the terrorists aren't Muslim, but all the Muslims are terrorists. Or it was the other way around. All Muslims aren't terrorists, but all the terrorists have been Muslim. That's what he said. So I reversed it. But then when he said that, I'm like, so what are these? What are these white supremacists? What's the KKK? All the stuff that's been happening. This kid that, young man, whatever you want to call him, boy, that did this killing in Jacksonville. This racist. That was terrorism. And it's constantly growing as these politicians are making it more acceptable. Because that's what I see. They're making it more acceptable, because they're frightening everybody into here in Florida. Well, we don't want the immigrants here because they're going to take our jobs. But yet you're not out here doing the jobs and building these homes that these immigrants are building. But they're taking your job. It's too much to unpack, man. So I'm gonna yield the floor and let somebody else jump in.
Now we can't have the silence. Now, come on, now.
Hey, no, I mean, Ray, pretty much. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's like at the end of the day. Nothing's going to be done about the terrorist groups that we have right here, homegrown. And the funny thing is, when you notice about these terror groups, the only way it's going to change is us voting again. It goes back to what Ron said earlier about an education process about voting. And I say that because I may be jumping the gun a little bit, but look at when you look at the cases that are facing your former president, 44 and a half, when you look at the prosecutors now, you got two? You got two prosecutors that are people of color. You look at the judge here in DC is a person of color. And guess what? These people could not have gotten there without us starting to vote and starting to make changes. And I think that, and I'm going around the barn, but eventually what we got to do, we got to start voting for people who are going to have our interest, people who are going to vote to reduce this assault ban. Okay, we got to have it. We got to have this assault ban. We got to have people that are going to start voting for those type of things. We got to start having people that's going to say, you know what? These people that they're January 6th, they got to go to jail, and they got to go to jail for a long time, because let's face it, people like DeSantis and Trump and some of these other radical groups, the only thing that's going to change them is when you start affecting their money and when they start going to jail. Other than that, as long as they have the freedom to do whatever they want to do, nothing's going to change. And so we got to start voting, get people in place that's going to have the laws that's going to affect mental health support. That's going to help, protecting our children in school. We got to start voting to get these type of people. And this radical, this motivated killing in Jacksonville, again, this is somebody who probably could have got some mental help, but because the laws and the way they are right now, nobody bothered him. It's like, okay, he's good to go. However, no matter how he's thinking, it's okay. He's not really going to bother nobody. But then, you have these type of people that have access to these type of weapons. So it's just a process that's going to have to change. It's all going back to us educating ourselves to understand the importance of going out to vote and to be active in our communities. That's the other thing too. We got to be active in our community. We got to be active in the process, because if we're not active in the process, they're going to run us over. And next thing you know, we didn't realize that this was changed or that happened, and we have no idea about it. So,
well, I tell you what, B, I agree with you as far as like the ban on assault weapons, but again, it's not going to change. Nothing is going to change that unless two things happen. One, every black person go out and buy a doggone AR-15. I bet you somebody will do something about instituting a assault rifle ban at that point in time. Two, nothing is going to happen to ban assault rifles getting into the hands of normal people until it happens to one of those Republicans' kids. One of those Republicans in office, if their family gets affected by someone that's using those assault weapons, that's when they'll ban them. But until then, they're not going to do anything because they're too busy having the NRA put money in their pockets. So that's that.
It's still not going to impact them, because what was that, a couple of years ago when the congressional softball team, they got shot when they were, so you have both Republicans and Democrats that got shot. What's his name? Scalia's out of Louisiana. He was in the hospital for over a year, and you would think that, okay, let me do something about it. Nope, they just chalked it up as something. But
nothing happened. Nothing happened because they said it was a Democrat that did the shooting, so that they weren't worrying about that. It was politically motivated. Somebody else.
Rod, you still there?
I am. I am here, and you know, as y'all were talking through that, it's just sad, quite honestly. Yeah, it's sad. It's the same story. It's just a different location, right? And I don't know that that those who are not impacted, it kind of goes back to my statement earlier about, you know, really understanding the things, the experiences that people have been through, the trauma that people have been through, the fear and intimidation that people live with in communities all across this country, because of mass shootings, because of racially motivated killings, just like there were with lynchings, you know, back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, right? You know, someone was lynched
Keep going.
in the 80s, right? In Mobile, Alabama. And it's senseless. All because someone wants to have dominion over another human being. Why? You know, so it is sad, but I have not seen any evidence that that the power centers, you know, in this country are willing to at least just have a transparent conversation about it and the impact that it's having on communities throughout America. Whether those people look like you or not, whether they share, you know, your values or not, they're human beings, you know, and that's probably, you know, doesn't raise to as high a level for some folks, because you have some people that treat their animals better than they treat other people. So again, it's back to being educated, understanding what people value, uh, dignity and respect, you know, and kind of live and let live, you know. You don't have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but those that are willing to dig deep and work hard, and be disciplined and be intentional about the life that they want to create for themselves in this country, that's what this country was built on. That's why the story of immigrants is so powerful in America, right? So, yeah, I would yield the floor back, but I just think that, the racially motivated killings, requires a national conversation, right? People talk about being, we send people to the moon. We invent solutions to problems all the time, but we seem to struggle with solving the problems that impact people in this country every day. Immigration, racially motivated killings, climate change.
Oh, that doesn't happen. Climate change isn't real.
Educating kids, taking care of the elderly to ensure that they're able to live out their final years with some dignity and respect and not have to worry about whether they eat or pay to keep their lights on. I mean, we got to look in the mirror at the end of the day and decide, what side of the conversation we want to be on. So,
The answers to the questions about, taking better care of our elderly communities, immigration, and I always make the joke. I'll be like, who needed a better immigration policy? The Native Americans. They need to keep them immigrants out that took over their country. They needed the immigration policy. They were too nice to these strangers that just popped up. But I think the answers are really insidious. But I do look forward to later on in the season, maybe even as soon as next episode, this conversation about education. An education about who we are, an education about. I love what he said about this country and the story of what an immigrant can accomplish and all of this, and talk about there are, with all of this stuff that is depressing, there literally are cheat codes to political power, success, and business in the United States. And I don't mean cheat codes as in they're hidden. It's just kind of if you understand these things. And there's a lot, especially us, as 5 men that have the experience that we are. So I really think that should be a conversation, that education piece, just talking about our social education, talking about our business acumen, political conversation. I definitely think that we should do that. But, it's hard to be philosophical about the racially motivated killing. But I was trying to say that it's all this bad stuff, DeSantis's comments, anti-woke, all of this. I wanted to save the last topic for a moment. I'm not going to assume everybody enjoyed this moment. I will say I enjoyed it. Ruckus, listen, my man threw his hat up. That was the bat signal. Aquaman comes swimming across the
Aquaman.
The hat was the call. The hat was the call. My man said,
The
look,
call and response.
I'm going to lose my job today. I'm losing. Y'all take this little hat, but we about to get it in. Yep.
Yeah, well, I'll go first, and then I'll let you all have it, because I'm sure that my position is probably way different. Well, I shouldn't say way different. I just think that, again, one, it goes back to the sense of entitlement that some people have, right? It goes back to what we think, feel, and believe about people that are different than us, especially if we have not been taught to be respectful of every other human being, regardless of their race, ethnicity, or what have you. It also speaks to the impact that alcohol plus a sense of entitlement plus a level of arrogance plays into our decision making, right? For instance, if I came from a neighborhood where I was able to assault people that didn't look like me and it was all good, I might not know how to separate that once I get outside of that neighborhood. Now I'm dealing with a different type of people. Maybe the people weren't fighting back before, but now I'm dealing with people that have been fighting and fighting back all their lives. And they're not standing for the disrespect or you putting your hands on me and not feel it come back to you. So again, I think people have to be really careful uh, about the choices they make, because it could end up like the Montgomery ruckus, you know, where, I mean, I just don't think people are going to allow anyone to put their hands on them. I think those days of running to try to find the authorities, you know, some people just weren't brought up like that. I mean, I saw it in my own neighborhood, you know. Some people you could run home. Other folks, you put your hand on them, you had to fight all day. You know? So again, don't let yourself become impaired, and then just treat people with dignity and respect. But I will turn it over to you, brothers.
I'll hop in. Um, and I know we've talked about this before, just between us, you know, but the one thing about that Montgomery ruckus is, you know, that their sense of entitlement. How many times are we going to talk about that? Their sense of entitlement was there. And for me, it was because Trump was in town for a rally the day before. And that's why they were in town. They rode that boat down the river so they could go and see Trump. So they basically they had their chest up, nipples out, and they decided we gon' attack this man for doing his job. When I first saw it, I thought it was a security guard. Dude was the first officer on that doggone riverboat. He was the co-captain. And he basically went over there, and the captain was on the actual PA system telling those folks to move their boat, and they wouldn't do it. So he sent the first officer over, the first mate, and he went and moved the boat. He explained what was going on. All of a sudden, they jump him. Hat goes up in the air, call to arms, and Aquaman jumps in the water. And a lot of those folks that rushed that group were employees on that riverboat. Everybody that was in those blue shirts were employees, and they were going to the aid of the guy that had gotten jumped. There is, again, so much that we could unpack here as to what the contributing factors are, but again, we're not going to take that anymore. You know, we have a right. Rod, you had mentioned, you know, live and let live for everyone. Well, it's not just for us; it's for everyone, and that's what this country was founded on, for everyone to have the ability to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But it has been what's the word I want to use? It's been altered. It's been altered because right now they're trying to just have it benefit the few versus everyone. So for me, it's like these white Republicans. FDR said it the best back in the day as to why folks are still acting the way that they're acting. If you give the poorest white man somebody to look down on, he will empty his pockets out for you. Look at Trump, supposed to be a billionaire, but yet he's got poor people financing his defense. But he's supposed to be a billionaire. But he's given them someone to look down upon. They have all made racism acceptable, open racism acceptable. So that's why that man got jumped, in my opinion, because, well, you know what? It's acceptable. But everything does need to change. It needs to change where everything can benefit. Everybody has the same benefits, the same freedoms. But until we actually teach actual history, until the education system is actually reformed, instead of them trying to teach what bits and pieces or make things that were atrocities seem like they were glamorous, nothing is going to change. Because again, we got to get the right folks in office, and we have to make sure that we are casting our ballots appropriately. So before I start rambling, I yield the floor.
Well, two things about the Montgomery Ruckus. You know, I saw my man with the chair, and all I could think was any means necessary. I could hear that playing in the back of my head. My man was like, any means necessary. Let me grab a chair, whatever it takes. But I looked at it as Black folks was just like, we're going to rally around this issue. We're just not going to let you take our brother out for no reason. And I think that's just part of now just being fed up when you look at, because all of us saw what happened to George Floyd. We saw George Floyd get killed. And, as a people, we felt helpless, and I just think now as a people, we're just like, we're not going to be helpless anymore. Again, that goes back to our voting. That goes back to where we live, how we live. We're just not going to be helpless anymore. If we can take that approach into everything we do, if we go into that approach with, saving our money, if we go into that approach with, wanting to get out and travel and see the world, educating our children, trying to provide for the next generation. If we just go with that mindset that we're not taking this anymore, I think we're going to be better off as a people. But that's why I looked at it as a rally cry. I don't know if you saw Roland Martin with how he edited, or how he on his show when he talked about Montgomery. But man, he was like, y'all didn't see this coming. And and I was for it. I'm like, my man got the chair. It's like, let's do this thing. But yeah, we are going to. I hopefully, with moving forward from that, we will grow from it, not just from the standpoint of looking out for each other, but just let's prepare and be ready for the next event that happens in our life and just move forward. That's all.
I'll let you jump in here, John, but I just want to say that hitting the woman with the chair, I don't know. That, to me, that's a line crossed, right? So I would just hope that everyone will be able to recognize the inappropriateness of that, right? And I'm all for protecting yourself, but I've seen that happen before in my own neighborhood. And I was appalled by it then. And all these years later, I guess I'm still appalled by, the violence towards the women. Save the fact that women, initiated attacking, a man. That's not acceptable either. But the woman on the ground, and then you take a chair after. Yeah,
I'm in agreement with you, Rod. That was the one thing I didn't agree with. That was the one
Yeah.
thing I didn't agree with, because that woman hadn't gotten hands put on her by some sisters, and that's why she was sitting on the ground, and dude with the chair and just took that chair to that white dude, and then it's like he saw her sitting there, and then he clubbed her with it. That's the only thing I did not agree with in that. And if he had been charged with assault with that, I would have been okay with it.
And I just
But
want to make sure that people really understand, and even those that were there involved in that is not who we are. Certainly shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Well,
but
I don't
think
agree
we got to
with
be careful. Yeah, we
Yeah.
got to be careful. If that is going to define who we are and nothing else, like they got off scot-free of being entitled and just whooping them. Because here's the part that's really important when we don't want to get this part lost. Because we have the context of they rallied around that man,
Mhm.
but there were 5-6 people that jumped on him, and it could have easily been one of those everybody just being a bystander, and this man could have been wounded so badly and even killed, and then we would have been saying, oh my God, this was so bad, this, that, and the other. And so we have the context of being able to see what else happened, but we know that this happens often. And he could have got beaten like Emmett Till, in that situation. And then so I think we need to keep the main thing. Like, I don't think anybody looked at that and said, oh, my favorite part was the dude hit the girl with the chair. Like, no, I know, even though she was mouthy, but I don't think that we saw that. I think it's important that we frame that in the way that, we came together as a collective and said, knuck if you buck. You know what I'm saying? Run up and get done up. We can't. And it was important because there's been so many situations where those entitled people could have got away with harming that man, and the police would have came and would have tried to make sure they were okay while that man laid there bleeding, all kinds of things. But we rallied, and we did what we had. And was it excessive? Anybody that's been in a fight can say when you're down, sometimes it gets a little excessive. And all of us ain't perfect. Like, that dude took an opportunity. You know what I'm saying? That wasn't cool, but it was important that we rallied to say that, man.
And we don't know what triggers that man have, because when there's mass shooters, they want to do, what was their trigger, and I agree with y'all about the chair, about the woman, but was the chair okay to hit a man, hit a woman? We just don't know what his trigger was. It could have been, we could say that fight was the trigger, but we don't know what he went through the day before. He could have been harassed by folks the day before, and that just made him snap. So that goes back to Rod, what you said earlier about, we just got to be able to respect people where they are, and this dude, was it right? No. But we don't know what triggers that caused him to go that way. So and that's my point with that. It's just, we got that going back to respect people where they are, what they've gone through, what they are continuing to go through. And we just got to be careful that we don't set people off on certain things. Not that we live our life for other people, but if you just respect people for where they are, where they've come from, a lot of these situations won't happen. Because if they just would have moved the boat, even though you ignored the captain's request, once the brother got off the boat and said, please, can you move your boat? Then he moved it for them. If they just accepted his explanation, cool. None of that would have happened. But again, because entitlement and, you don't have the right to do X, Y, and Z. That's what all that, that's what initiated.
It was everything up to them putting their hands on that man. Everything up to that point. You know what I'm saying? Like, it could have been civil, but they put their hands on that man. He was
And the thing is, they put their hands on him because he was doing his job. He wasn't doing it just for grins and giggles. He was doing his job. He was moving the boat so that paddle boat could park. He was doing his job. It wasn't he just did it just for the sake of doing it. He was doing his job. But before we change gears, before we go or whatever.
Yeah, the next gear is getting out of here.
Yeah, so I since y'all mentioned the chair, Did you happen to see doggone Desmond Howard show up at college game day with a doggone chair? They were in Tuscaloosa. He showed up with the doggone chair and had the Texas emblem on it. And I was hollering because he picked Texas and held the chair up on national TV. I was screaming when I saw that. I'm sorry. That was funny to me.
Yeah, I did see that. And it's become a meme, right? As those things typically do.
Somebody got a painting out there. You can order the painting of it.
John, you're muted, bro.
Thank you, brother. That further enforces the point that Rod was making, though. We're putting a lot of focus on the chair, and that wasn't right. But we do have to remember, throughout history, whenever Black communities have stepped up to protect their own, we've been vilified and demonized. Thinking back to the Black Panthers, of how they were targeted by government groups, the police, and so many others. To think about how the infiltration in the the leadership conference that Dr. Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, and all these people were a part of, infiltrating those to commit violence against our own. To think about the Bloods and the Crips. When it originally started, Crips stands for Community Resistance in Progress. And Blood stood for, this is the blood of my blood. And they started out as organizations to protect these neighborhoods. And we've been villainized and demonized for any effort to protect our communities. And the expectation has been, when a young man comes into a church and kills 9 people in Charleston, or the Buffalo shooter goes into a grocery store in a Black community and kills people, or this man in Jacksonville that goes into the Dollar General, the expectation is for us to say, this is so terrible, but I pray for them and I forgive them. But yet, whenever the expectation is for us to defend ourselves. So I just want to kind of close it out on that thought that, if there's an assault on our community, it is okay to protect ourselves. And we've got to be able to protect ourselves intellectually, emotionally, politically, financially, and all these other ways. But I'm not above knuck if you buck. Run up, get done up, So I'm definitely for that. Yeah, but I definitely, Brother Kev wants to encourage us all, between now and next episode. For all of you that are tuned in, we thank you so much for continuing to support Black Men with Purpose podcast. And between now and next episode, we'd like to hear what you all are doing to positively affect the Black community. Obviously, we'll come up with ours, but we would like to hear from all of you what you're doing to positively affect that. And this week, we're going to close with a quote. We obviously want to thank you for taking time to join us. And as we wrap up this week's episode, this quote says, and it's from civil rights leader, congressman, and author, the late, great John Lewis. And he said, when you see something that's not right, not just, not fair, you have a moral obligation to say something, to do something. So, again, thank y'all for tuning in. And until next time, peace. Yeah.